Hello and welcome, my beautiful friends and Californians. It's Sapphire. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. So I know it's been quite a while since I've spoken out about politics on this channel, and that's because I've largely been avoiding recent news and politics lately in order to preserve my own mental health. But the truth is, neither I nor can mostly anyone else avoid it entirely, even by choice, especially when it comes to knocking, which it has been a lot lately. And in the US right now, whoo, girl, the political climate, she's wild. In light of said political climate, the Congress of the state of California has chosen to respond by creating and proposing the Proposition 50 to the voters of California for consideration. Yay or nay? It is this topic I've chosen to speak out about and share with y'all today, especially for any of you all who may call this lovely, beautiful state your home as well. I know it's not my typical type of content, and for that, I guess I apologize, but you all are also welcome to watch literally anything else on my channel or any other channel if either you don't live here and don't care, or live here and just want spiritual or motivational content instead. Go ahead, that's fine. You can tune into anything else. But don't get it twisted. Nothing wrong. But don't get it twisted. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I love and respect all of you who have chosen to visit my channel. It's just different in this world and in this country when, as a trans woman, and same goes for someone else from virtually any other minority or marginalized group of people. Your very existence is political, especially in this political moment. It's, up for debate and stuff like that. And, my existence and their existence, your existence, is not up for debate. This is just part of my life and part of my reality, as much as I'd love to have my head in the love and light clouds all the time. You are forced to pay attention and be aware at least a little, and you are forced to respond in some way for the sake of your own well-being and that of your friends, family, and your community. In light of the current reality and this proposition itself a response to this current reality, I just felt called to speak out about this topic in this political moment. So if it's not your cup of tea, feel free to click away. Otherwise, please continue to watch and enjoy. Also, bear with me, there may be a fair amount of reading of the proposition itself and sources. So before I get into it, please take a moment to like this video if you enjoy this content and you want to show the love. Comment your thoughts and feelings. Subscribe and turn on the bell if this type of content resonates with you and you'd love to see more like it. And even donate if you feel called. Namaste. And please, if you will leave a comment, please be civil and respectful. Thank you. So getting back into it, I'd like to just start with the Prop 50 quick reference guide. So what does the actual text of Prop 50 say? Prop 50 authorizes temporary changes to congressional district maps in response to Texas's partisan redistricting. It's a legislative constitutional amendment. So in summary, it requires temporary use of new congressional district maps through 2030. Direct independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to resume enacting congressional district maps in 2031. It establishes policies supporting nonpartisan redistricting commissions nationwide. Its fiscal impact is very small, one-time costs to counties of up to a few $1 million statewide to update election materials to reflect new congressional district maps. So in the context of the summary, what does a yes or no vote for What does a yes or no vote for Prop 50 mean? A yes vote on this measure means the state would use new legislatively drawn congressional district maps starting in 2026. California's new maps would be used until the California Citizens Redistricting Commission draws new maps following the 2030 U.S. Census. A no vote on this measure means current congressional district maps drawn by the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, aka the Commission, would continue to be used in California until the Commission draws new maps following the 2030 census. So as it stands, the proposal laid out in plain but relatively plain English anyways, California's congressional district maps will use legislatively drawn congressional district maps until after the next census, should this proposition pass. Proposition 50 replaces California's current congressional district maps with new legislatively drawn maps. The total number of districts would not change. Proposition 50's maps must follow federal law, but they are not required to follow the state requirements placed on the commission. The state would use Proposition 50's maps for congressional elections starting in 2026. The state would use these maps until the commission draws new district maps following the 2030 census. The full proposed amendment of Proposition 50, should it pass, is as follows. First, this measure shall be known and may be cited as the Election Rigging Response Act. Second, the people of the state of California find and declare all of the following to be true. President Donald Trump has called on Republican-led states to undertake an unprecedented mid-decade redistricting of congressional seats to rig the, I'm inserting my own words here, to allegedly rig the 2026 United States midterms elections, because that language is a little strong to just say without also accompanying with evidence. There is evidence for that claim, but we'll get into that later in the discussion here. So like I was saying, there is this right-wing effort to undertake an unprecedented mid-decade redistricting of congressional seats to attempt to rig the 2026 United States midterm elections before voting even begins. Part B of this proposed amendment, the state of Texas has convened a special session of its legislature to redraw congressional district maps to unfairly advantage Republicans. The legislature of the state of Florida has established a select committee to advance an extraordinary mid-decade redistricting to unfairly advantage Republicans as well. Republicans have urged the state of Ohio to conduct its mid-decade redistricting to unfairly produce more Republican seats in Congress. Republican officials in the states of Indiana, Missouri, New Hampshire, Nebraska, and South Carolina are also considering President Trump's call for the mid-decade redistricting of congressional seats to unfairly advantage Republicans. President Trump and Republicans are attempting to gain enough seats through redistricting to rig the outcome of the 2026 United States midterm elections, regardless of how the people vote. President Trump's election rigging scheme is an emergency for our democracy. The 2026 United States midterm elections are the voters' only chance to provide an essential check and balance against President Trump's dangerous agenda. California has long stood as a national leader for fair, independent, and nonpartisan redistricting. California calls on all other states to commit to fair and impartial drawing of maps. California has a duty to defend democracy. The 2026 United States midterm elections for Congress must be conducted on a level playing field without an extreme and unfair advantage to Republicans. The people of California, not politicians, should have the power to approve temporary congressional district maps in response to President Trump's election rigging scheme. So what then is the full argument in favor of Proposition 50? Well, the argument from proponents of Prop 50 is as follows. Stop Trump from rigging the 2026 election. Donald Trump and Texas Republicans are making an unprecedented power grab to steal congressional seats and rig the 2026 election before voting even begins. Other Republican states are following suit. They want to steal enough seats to control Congress, even if voters overwhelmingly reject their agenda. This isn't politics as usual, it's an emergency for our democracy. Ensure fair representation in Congress. We have already seen how Trump has recklessly imposed tariffs and hurt California's families, economy, and denied disastrous assistance to fire victims, and ordered mass arrests without warrant. The 2026 election for Congress represents our only chance to provide an essential check and balance on Trump's dangerous agenda. If Californians don't act now, Donald Trump will seize total power for 2 more years. Proposition 50, the Election Rigging Response Act, will put a stop to their anti-democratic scheme. Here's what it does. It levels the playing field. Prop 50 makes sure the 2026 midterm elections are conducted on a level playing field without an unfair advantage to Republicans. Proposition 50 commits to fair redistricting. Unlike claims that it's going to result in the politicians deciding on the congressional maps for California, Prop 50 itself makes a commitment to fair redistricting, and you could see that, you could hear or see that from the text that I already presented of the actual proposition itself. So it commits to fair redistricting. It reaffirms California's commitment to independent redistricting and calls for a nationwide commitment to fair and impartial maps. It gives voters the power. Proposition 50 puts the power in the hands of the people of California, not backroom politicians, to approve emergency congressional district maps in response to Trump's election rigging scheme. It is fair and proportional. Proposition 50 provides emergency maps only because Republicans have moved forward with their power grab. It is temporary. These maps expire in 2030, and Proposition 50 preserves California's award-winning redistricting reforms. And it reaffirms the California Citizens Redistricting Commission's authority to draw congressional districts after the next census. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Republicans rig the election and steal control of Congress's next year, they'll continue to eliminate healthcare for millions of Americans, slash funding for schools, and cut essential services for veterans to pay for tax breaks for billionaires and big corporations. And the concluding statement of support for Prop 50: protect democracy in all 50 states. California has a duty to defend democracy. To do that, we can't unilaterally disarm or fight with both hands tied behind our backs. When Trump tries to rig elections, we must fight back with every tool available. Prop 50 draws fair maps that represent California's diverse communities and ensures our voices are not silenced by partisan gerrymandering in other states. California leads the nation in protecting voter rights and fair elections. When other states try to silence our voices and rig the system, we must respond decisively. Join President Barack Obama, Governor Gavin Newsom, Senator Alex Padilla, Senator Adam Schiff, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, election experts, independent redistricting commissioners, Planned Parenthood, the NAACP, California veterans, teachers, and nurses, in voting yes on Proposition 50 to stop Trump's election rigging scheme. Vote yes for checks and balances. Vote yes to protect democracy in all 50 states. So just to be a little bit fair and balanced, although, I think it is clear where I am coming from in this Proposition 50 debate, especially from the title of the video. But to be, in the interest of sharing the argument against Proposition 50, because it is important to have that perspective, well, I would like to present the rebuttal to the argument in favor of Proposition 50. So they argue the wrong path, no on Prop 50. We know American democracy is on fire, but accelerating gerrymandering only adds fuel to the fire. Politicians are seizing the crisis to justify a power grab. Proposition 50 does not defend democracy. Proposition 50 is not a magic pill to cure the nation's ills. It claims to protect democracy, yet diminishes our community's voices and is ineffective against any overreach of presidential power. Vote no. California gerrymandering allowed the legislature to draw partisan seats without transparency or citizen input solely to protect incumbents. By 2001, the government was gridlocked with legislatures held hostage to the extremes of their parties. Voters rose up and handed the line drawing ability over to citizens, resulting in competitive districts. Previously safe seats must now be earned. Better representation, women in the legislature doubled, Asian representation tripled, Black representation nearly doubled, and Latino seats grew by 8%. Government for the people. With more moderate representatives, the legislature passed a bipartisan legislation working for the interests of all Californians. We, the people. Districts do not belong to either party. They do not belong to party bosses. They belong to the people. But party bosses want to call the shots. Again, no to a pay-to-play system. Proposition 50 says this is temporary. Yet the legislature will bypass the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission again in 2028 and 2030, and perhaps beyond. Don't be fooled. Legislators drew this map behind closed doors for you to rubber stamp. It is not your choice. Vote no on partisan gerrymandering. Vote no on Prop 50. And the folks who are presenting this argument against Prop 50 is Cynthia Dye, rotating chair for Citizens Redistricting Commission, Jeanne Raya, rotating chair for Citizens Redistricting Commission, and Jody Filkins Weber, rotating chair for Citizens Redistricting Commission. It is a little bit suspicious that all of their subtitles or credentials after their names are exactly the same. And I think that shows that they want to kind of hide or disguise whatever their hidden ties might be. Like what role do they actually play in Californian politics and communities? It's a little bit, just ambiguous because it's the same title for all these people. It's a little strange. So the opposition to Proposition 50 also presented a full-on argument against the Proposition 50 rather than just that simple rebuttal I shared with you. I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty, the full-on details of their argument against Proposition 50. I'm just going to go in the broad strokes, the bulletin points of what they're saying here. So again, they're claiming that Proposition 50 is a power grab by the politicians, by the Congress members of California, the California legislature. And that's the tricky thing because it is kind of true. It's but it's a half truth. It's missing the context and it's missing the reason why. It's missing the reason why there was this emergency measure, this emergency meeting that was brought to session in California Congress, and it's also missing that these folks are elected by the people of California ultimately. So it's it's a half truth, but with any deep analysis of it, it kind of becomes a little flimsy. their argument's also missing the further clarification and the further context that this does not in any way eliminate the Citizens Election Redistricting Commission. It's not eliminating that commission at all. It's just an emergency measure to approve these new congressional district maps with the intention of balancing the current partisan gerrymandering that is going on in other congressional seats and districts throughout the nation, especially in Republican states, as the argument for Prop 50 has stated. So Prop 50 is absolutely kind of a fight fire with fire measure. It's a temporary measure to fight the fire of this Republican partisan district gerrymandering with, with congressionally approved district maps here in California as a countermeasure to that. But as much as it may be this kind of fight fire with fire measure, it is only temporary, and it will change after 2030 when the Citizens Election Redistricting Commission reconvenes post 2030 census. And as an aside, the argument for and against Proposition 50 is arguably pretty confusing to the average voter, citizen, layperson in California. It is a little bit strange and confusing with the language for both pro and against it. And I'm absolutely hoping that the people of California do see through any kind of illusions or deceptions, especially coming from the no argument against this proposition, and see the truth of the proposition and the context of it for what it is. So the other core argument that the anti-Prop 50 folks are putting forth here is that Prop 50 repeals landmark voter-approved election reforms. That's their assertion. Another argument is that it is another scheme to permanently end independent redistricting. And finally, they're saying that is a massive waste of taxpayer money, which is absolutely not true, and kind of reveals that they're playing fast and loose with the truth, especially with that claim. So where is this argument against Proposition 50 coming from? Who were the drafters of that? Who are the drafters of this statement? So it's a different group of folks from the rebuttal argument people, but I'll share who these folks are. So it's votersfirstact.org. That's the first one. Roberto Moncada, board member, United Latinos Action. Faith Batista Tamashiro, president, National Diversity Coalition. And Taylor Shorty, board member, Community Repower Movement. So this new group of folks who are presenting the argument against Proposition 50 rather than the rebuttal against the yes on 50 folks, it's a different group of people, right? It's almost seeming like they're trying to get the diversity vote with that. They're kind of trying to bait people here. And that's absolutely not to say that the folks that support Prop 50 are not diverse, because that's the furthest thing from the truth. It's a very diverse coalition, and you could already see that from the names that I mentioned that are in favor of Prop 50. And I'll get more into that. But in my humble opinion, the rebuttal to the argument against Proposition 50 does an amazing job of shutting down the argument against this measure. And I will share with you all how they go about disassembling and destroying the argument of the anti-Prop 50 folks. So the warning, there's a first warning on the top of the rebuttal. It says, no 150 is backed by Trump extremists. Who's spending millions against Prop 50? An anti-choice mega millionaire named Charles Munger Jr., who wants to help Donald Trump and red state Republicans rig the 2026 elections and hand Trump unchecked power for 2 more years. Independent redistricting commissioners, election experts, and leading civil rights organizations from the NAACP to the National Democratic Redistricting Committee urge you to reject the lies spread by No on 50's phony front groups. Lie number 1. Prop 50 repeals landmark voter-approved election reforms. This is plainly false. Prop 50 calls on all states to end partisan redistricting, partisan gerrymandering rather, and reaffirms the power of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission to draw the lines after the next census in 2030. Lie number 2. Proposition 50 removes requirements to keep cities, counties, and local communities together. Proposition 50 does the opposite, keeping more cities and counties combined and communities together than California's existing maps. Lie number 3. Prop 50 puts politicians back in charge of redistricting and drawing their own districts. Untrue. Proposition 50 puts the power to approve emergency maps in the hands of the voters, not politicians. Lie number 4. Proposition 50 permanently ends independent redistricting. Also untrue. Proposition 50 is a temporary and proportional response to Trump's election rigging scheme and expires in 2030. Californians cannot allow Donald Trump and Texas Republicans to rig the 2026 election and silence our voices. Vote yes on Prop 50. Protect democracy, preserve nonpartisan redistricting, and ensure a fair election in all 50 states. And this argument in favor of Proposition 50 and a rebuttal against the argument against it. So the people who are presenting this argument: Sarah Sidwani, Commissioner of the 2020 California Citizens Redistricting Commission. So she's on the commission. She's like, yes, vote in favor of this. Jody Hicks, President, Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California, and Nikki Davis Malevsky, President of the Sacramento City Teachers Association. And even that financial cost argument coming from the anti-Proposition 50 folks is basically a moot point that is destroyed by the text of the proposition itself. And that is under the header fiscal effects. Minor one-time costs to county and state election officials. Counties run elections and the state oversees them. Because most congressional districts in California would change at least some under new maps, county and state elections officials would need to update election materials. This would result in one-time costs to counties of up to a few $1,000,000 statewide, and one-time costs to the state of roughly $200,000. The state amount is much less than 0.1% of the state's roughly $220 billion general fund budget. The general fund is the account the state uses to pay for most public services, including education, healthcare, and prisons. 1/10, less than 0.1% of the general fund budget. And it's a few $1,000,000, which is like nothing. It's piddly compared to California's GDP, for example. Yeah, it's a drop in the ocean, relatively speaking, even though that would be enough to change my life, right? Or anybody else's life. But ultimately, it's not that much for the budget of California. It's very, very small. So as you can see, that kind of destroys the argument, the fiscal argument against Prop 50. Now, finally, with all that being said, I think it's really important to get into who is actually funding the support and the opposition to Proposition 50. So support for Proposition 50 is primarily funded by Governor Gavin Newsom and major Democratic organizations, with nearly $97 million raised including significant contributions from figures like George Soros and the House Majority Political Action Committee. Opponents, led by Dr. Charles Munger Jr., have raised about $42 million, focusing on a good governance message against gerrymandering. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the funding for and against Proposition 50. So the fundraising battle over Governor Gavin Newsom's Proposition 50 isn't close, but the race is. Since July, the Proposition 50 campaign has raised nearly $97 million, which does not include the nearly $13 million that billionaire investor Tom Steyer has spent separately to run his own Proposition 50 ads. And this is all coming from the local newspaper, the local news for the Almanac, the nonprofit local news for the Mid-Peninsula. So this is part of the Bay Area, part of the San Francisco Peninsula. So this is coming from the paper, the Almanac. The No on Proposition 50 campaign, with about $42 million, has less than half of that haul, report Cal Matters' Maya C. Miller and Jean Kwong. The Yes campaign's ads, which include big-name Democrats such as former President Barack Obama and U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, mostly emphasize pushing back against President Donald Trump. Steyer's ad, for instance, urges voters to stick it to Trump. And the influential California Labor Federation reminded its 2 million members in a series of digital ads that the Trump administration fired federal workers and cut infrastructure spending. And with this article that I like to share from the LAist, it goes into even greater detail as to who's funding the opposition and the support for Proposition 50. So who's donating to the Prop 50 campaigns? The No campaign. The largest individual donor to the campaign so far is Charles T. Munger Jr., who's donated $32.8 million. He's a Palo Alto-based physicist, former chair of the Santa Clara Republican Party, and son of the late billionaire Charles Munger, former vice chair of Berkshire Hathaway. Earlier this month, he wrote an op-ed for the New York Times detailing his reasons for opposing Prop 50. I oppose gerrymandering in any state regardless of the party responsible for initiating it, he wrote. Another $5 million came from the No on 50 Congressional Leadership Fund, a Washington, D.C. based super PAC, an independent group allowed to raise and spend unlimited amounts of money on political campaigns dedicated to electing Republicans to the House of Representatives. Outside of Munger and the Congressional Leadership Fund, there are more than 190 donors to the No campaign so far, some of them individual contributors and other ballot measure committees. The Yes campaign. Fundraising in support of Prop 50 is made up of more than 65,000 different funders so far. This list is quite a lot to unpack, so here are some highlights among top spenders. So the top one is HMP for Prop 50. That's a political action campaign, or committee rather. Fund for Policy Reform, California Teachers Association, California Nurses Association, National Education Association, Newsom for California Governor, Michael Moritz, not sure who that is. Consumer Attorneys of California. Yeah, Michael Moritz is apparently a rich gentleman, but moving on. Consumer Attorneys of California Issues Political Action Committee, Democratic Action, Yes on 50, Dignity California SEIU Local 2015, so that's a local union. Couple names, again, I don't recognize. Working for Working Americans, sponsored by United Brotherhood of Carpenters, California Conference of Carpenters Building Communities Fund, Standing Committee on Political Education of the California Labor Federation, AFL-CIO, another union. So the Fund for Policy Reform, this is the biggest contributor to date for the Yes campaign with $10 million in donations. It's a Delaware-based lobbying firm founded by billionaire George Soros. The fund has contributed to California state ballot measure campaigns before, notably to support Prop 64, a 2016 measure voters approved to legalize recreational marijuana, and Proposition 10, a failed 2018 measure that would have expanded cities' ability to enact rent control laws. HMP, this stands for House Majority PAC, a super PAC dedicated to electing Democrats to the House of Representatives. This group has contributed to a total of about $10 million so far. Labor groups. Top contributors include the California Teachers Association, PAC, the California Nurses Association, and Dignity California SEIU, Local 2015. These groups have traditionally contributed large sums to the California Democratic Party and party-endorsed ballot measures, campaigns, or candidates. And there are some billionaires among the funders of Yes on 50. That includes Sequoia Capital Chairman Michael Moritz, Cargill heiress and philanthropist Gwendolyn Sondheim, and Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings are all among top donors. All three have previously contributed to campaigns supported by the California Democratic Party. So I think the takeaway from the funding is that it's following more or less heavily along partisan lines. Democrat, liberal folks in favor of Prop 50 and Republican, conservative folks in opposing Prop 50. So beyond that, I'm seeing a lot of billionaire support in the campaign of the opposition towards Prop 50. So the opposition for Prop 50 seems like a lot of billionaires, but you can argue that there are billionaires supporting Proposition 50 as well. So there's that. But on the other hand, there's a lot of labor groups, like a lot of labor support for Proposition 50, whereas the opposition for Prop 50 really doesn't have that. The vast majority of the funding against Prop 50 is also coming from one single billionaire donor, Charles T. Munger Jr. And second to that is just their political action committee in general, the overall fund that they have. Whereas the funding for Prop 50, there's a much bigger spread there across various different groups, and some of them are more working class, more union, and more like lower middle class. I mean, you're seeing huge amount of individual donations from a lot of people with the Proposition 50 support group. Whereas against Prop 50, it's a much smaller subset of people. Here with the support for Proposition 50, it's kind of a bigger spread across all kinds of different socioeconomic backgrounds. So I think that's wonderful to see. It's showing that there's a lot of grassroots support for Prop 50, and it's not just simply like party bosses that are pulling the strings and want this measure to go through. And of course they do want this measure to go through, but it's more, there's a ton more grassroots support than just that. Now, it does seem likely that Proposition 50 will in fact pass. I mean, we're seeing high 50s amount of voters who are likely voters in this November 2025 election in California. It seems like well over 50%, high 50s are supporting this measure, want it to go through. And you're seeing like 30 to like low 40s percent against it among likely voters. So that's a beautiful sign to have already. So I'm not too worried. It's just that I wanted to present the argument for and against it. And I wanted to especially emphasize, what I see in my opinion is that Prop 50 really has the best arguments. The yes on Prop 50 folks really have the best argument here. And I strongly encourage you, if you are any viewers or folks in California, please vote yes in favor of Prop 50. It's not a partisan, straight down partisan lines measure. Honestly, it's not. Although the support and the financial backing says otherwise, it is in fact a measure to protect the votes of all Californians. And you can see that from the commitments to retain and protect the Citizens Election Redistricting Commission. It's not going away. It's just a temporary approval of emergency redistricting maps as approved by the Congress of California, who is in fact who have in fact been voted for by the people of California, both left and right. So absolutely, there's a case that this is a partisan issue and a partisan measure. Things are falling on those party lines, but it's very encouraging to see at least that most of California is already in support of it. For at least from what we can see from polling. But that being said, every vote is important and essential, and I absolutely encourage and urge every one of my lovely viewers and friends who may be from California to vote in support of this measure. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a beautiful day and a wonderful Monday and Tuesday here, and hopefully Prop 50 passes. Thank you so much. Take care.